Start the clock. How many species are there in the world? Lots is good. About 8.7 million, according to the most recent estimates. I'll give points for 10 million. How do they all get here? Lots of ways, lots of different drivers of diversification, proliferation, and formation of species. And as a scientist, as an evolutionary biologist, I want to understand the truth. I want to understand how they got here. And I want to do this objectively. I know that the truth is out there, so I can get to the truth. As I'm a scientist, I'm not interested in some sort of narrative fallacy. I'm not a journalist. I haven't got an agenda to peddle. I'm not giving in to some corporation. I'm searching neutrally, objectively for the truth. Or am I? Am I actually peddling an agenda through my subconscious, through the departments that I've grown up in, through the advisors that I've had? Ecologists, where I did my PhD, like the idea that ecological interactions drive diversity. So this is competition among species. The favourite model, the Red Queen model after Alice in Wonderland, it takes all the evolving you can do just to stay in the same place. Get involved in co-evolutionary arms races, just to stand still, relatively. Geologists don't like this idea because they can't study it. They haven't got the resolution. Geologists like a court jester model, where nothing of interest happens for vast periods of time. And then suddenly an asteroid whams into the Gulf of Mexico, and dinosaurs go extinct. You can see that in the fossil record. So how do you get these two increasingly entrenched camps apart? How do you make them see potential in seemingly unpromising ground? And the answer I propose is that you need to look with a fresh pair of eyes. Because a fresh pair of eyes can reveal quite dull-looking mud to be actually quite fascinating. So these are planktonic foraminifera. They are sexually reproducing species. This lot come from sediment like that previous slide, but these are 35 million years old, and they are all smaller than a pinhead. They're still alive today. There's about 40 evolutionary species alive today, and they live in the mixed layer of the ocean, blobbing around, feeding voraciously on diatoms and other even smaller things than they are. And the great advantage of them, as opposed to studying something like charismatic vertebrates, is that there's lots of them. Millions and millions. The only limiting factor here is the time that you've got to measure the things. And so what you can do is look at those global phenomena, like competition, like climate change, and also relate it to differences among individuals, among species, that raw variation that drives evolution, as Darwin so famously posited. And what this means, or all this great abundance of data, means that we can devise robust statistical methods to do things like date when speciation from an ancestral form into descendant forms occurs. We don't need to get into taxonomic arguments with one expert laying his house on one side and another on the other. We can come up with some kind of objective evidence for what happens. We want to do the same thing for what drives diversification, why there are so many species. And in the next series of slides, what we observe is on the x-axis, and what we predict from our models is on the y-axis. If we knew everything, this is what we'd see. That was physics. Biology is not physics. This is a Red Queen model. This is one of the most famous evolutionary models that exists, and it's rubbish in this instance. Those points are not lying along the line. So if you're a court jester kind of guy, you're pretty happy at this stage. But you have to stop being happy now, because a court jester model is really no better. And so these two entrenched camps, both convinced that they are right, aren't really very right at all. Let's consider the idea that the differences among species matter. The next blue dots will be differences in foraging behavior, so how you catch food. It's fairly fundamental for all of us in how we live and how much nutrients we'll get into ourselves. It's better, there's a little bit of vertical delineation, but this is still not really going along those lines. What we need is to move away from these isolated things to something that incorporates them all. Let interactions occur between competition, different climates, different types of individuals, and then we start to get somewhere. then we start to get closer to this line where our model's telling us something about how these species arrived. In summary, if we look at things in isolation, that's bad. We haven't got any predictive power. If we look at things together, that's good. In that there's fair predictive power, we can start to make reasoned decisions as to how these things have evolved. It's different types of competition in different types of climate with different types of species. And all those things change with one. And they change not only in terms of just producing new species in one way, but also the extinction of old species. So if we're talking about the interplay between competition, you might be good at competing in one environment but bad in another. The way that plays out changes from speciation to extinction. And it's no real surprise that this plays out differently because the world is very interconnected and we don't all share mutually altruistic two-way relationships. It's very the world's very dense, it's very connected. It's hard to see the wood for the trees when you're in the middle of a network like that. What you need to do is step back, look at things with a fresh perspective. And one of the interesting things about evolutionary biology is that Darwin originated the field with his book and in conversation with Alfred Wallace, but he was a geologist. And he set sail to collect interesting species for rich Victorians. And so what he found was he wasn't limited by the biological thinking of the day. What he was able to do was to look at all these species of finches on Galapagos, see how they were all connected, and come up with new reasons for how they came about. And it's that fresh perspective, that willingness to open your eyes and to acknowledge different types of thought that wrote one of the great books of scientific history.